Welcome to Global Risk Community Chat. Today our guest is Ed Sleiman. I'm very happy to have you here today, Ed. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, likewise. So before we get into our topic for today, can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. My name is Ed Sleiman, as you mentioned, and I've been in the IT industry for about 38 years, the last 12 or 13 out of which have been in cybersecurity, and been all around the world, currently working out of Saudi Arabia. And I'm originally from Lebanon and the US, and have been in the field for quite some time. I speak at various conferences around the world about cyber risk and cyber risk management, and that's pretty much it.
Sounds great. So with that, I hear a lot of expertise and experience, and I'm curious on what topic you'd like to share with us. I'm hearing a lot about cyber risk, but is that our topic?
Yes, as a matter of fact, since this is about GRC chat and the R stands for risk, I thought probably I'll talk about one of the types of risks that we deal with in cybersecurity, which is a human risk. As you all know, when hackers or basically internet criminals do look at hacking into organizations or into individuals, what they do is they use a certain strategy. Sometimes this is borrowed from the military or from physical conflicts in general, and that is basically they look at their target and they need to collect information about the target. This is what we call recon. Okay, so they do some reconnaissance and basically understand what vulnerabilities may be, what are the weaknesses there. They probably do first multiple scans of the network to figure out if there are any holes. And if there are any holes, what's running on these ports, for example, and try to understand how they could exploit these holes or vulnerabilities to be able to get into a certain system or penetrate a certain network. That usually takes a long time, especially, sometimes if a system is hardened, a network is pretty well built and designed for security, for it to be secure, it becomes harder for the attacker to try to find systems or ways to penetrate that network. So what they resort to more often than not is a better and easier hack, much faster hack, hacking the human. So this is where human risk management comes into effect or into place, because for humans, it's much easier to hack a human than hack a network or technology. Even though technology evolves, and one of the issues that we have with technology is that software keeps being updated, and we have sometimes holes in this software, and we have to keep patching it. So it is a kind of a cat and mouse approach. We have to always be looking out for these vulnerabilities and patching them. But then who patches the human vulnerability? And how can we do that? This is what I'd like to talk about today, because it's extremely important. A lot of 90%, more than 90% of hacks start with some kind of social engineering, which basically is the use or use of certain knowledge and information about a person, and to try to basically use that information against that person to extract information from them. That's much easier than the process that I explained earlier, by which I have to do reconnaissance, find out holes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Thus, it's much easier for me to understand, and a lot of these days, unfortunately, a lot of humans, even professionals, even security professionals, sometimes they do put out a lot of information about themselves on the internet. And thus, I could use this information to try to hack into a system that is used by that person without having to understand much about the technology behind the scenes. And that's very common these days. We face a lot of these, and and part of my job as a CISO for the last 10 years has been trying to mitigate these risks that are associated with humans. So what I started looking at is that, okay, we need to mitigate that risk by training, right? But how much training do I need to provide to my constituents? How much awareness should I provide to my employees? And that is a constant battle, because especially if you're in a large organization, if you have thousands of employees, it becomes very costly and time consuming to be able to educate these employees day in, day out about the risks looming. So how do you do that in an effective manner? And that's where what I call human risk management. And this is where I actually looked at various innovative approaches to manage that. As you know, in most countries around the world, we do have a point system for the Department of Motor Vehicles. Like for when you're driving on the roads, basically you have, if you violate a certain law, you basically get a certain number of points. You may also get a ticket, of course, you have to pay it, but also there's a point system by which they associate certain points to your record. And thus, after a certain number of points, your driver's license may be revoked, and you may not have the privilege of driving on the roads anymore. I've taken that concept and built a similar concept, which I dubbed the human firewall. The human firewall program is a program that I established in my organization in 2014, and it has proven to be very fruitful and successful in managing the human risk in a very effective and efficient manner. How does that work? So basically, you have certain points associated with certain violations on the network. So let's say if someone shares their password, they get a 3-point violation. If they click on a fish, it's a simulated fish that we send out, then they get 3 points also for divulging their password, for example, or 2 points for opening an attachment, or 1 point for clicking on a link within an email, et cetera, et cetera. If they click on an actual fish, I'm sorry about that. If they click on an actual fish, what they do is that they get also a point or two, a demerit point. And that system, we started implementing it, and we could see now people and how their behavior on the network is. But the issue with that is that it is a negative approach. It's based on the negative points, and people don't like that much for you to point out the negative in what they do. So we flipped that program. We created a balanced approach by which we said, okay, if you do a good deed by not sharing your password, by attending training, by catching a fish that we simulate, that we send you as a simulation, et cetera, you get some merit points. On the other hand, you get demerit points if you do not do these things, or if you fall for a fish, et cetera, et cetera. So now these points balance out, and you get a score, which is called the human firewall score. In most financial institutions, or actually in most countries, you have something called a financial score associated with your record. So basically, if you pay your bills on time, if you, let's say, don't have any late payments or interest, et cetera, if you don't have that many credit cards open, et cetera, you get what they call in the States, for example, a FICO score, which is basically your financial credit score. And that the human firewall, thus the human firewall became a similar or an equivalent score for your behavior on a network, for your behavior as a vigilant user on the system. And thus we were able to track basically each individual score and reward them accordingly, or I don't want to use the word penalize, or let's say help them get better or perform better from a human perspective, from a human detection perspective, from a social engineering perspective, as they went along during their career. So basically, how did that make it efficient for us as the CISO office trying to do this continual training, especially in large organizations? As I mentioned earlier, you need a lot of resources for you to be able to continuously train and make aware all your community. The issue here is that now that you have a score associated with each and every individual, you can basically, based on that score, focus on those who are the most risky in your organization. And thus, what you have currently is, for example, a three-tiered approach by which you have, a red, green, and red, green, and amber, or RAG approach, red, amber, and green. If you're in the red, then the awareness team will focus more on your behavior, on asking you to go to training, on training you properly to become in the amber side or in the green side eventually. So basically, that allows any team that is concerned with awareness and training to focus their efforts on those who need it the most, instead of just spray and pray approach where you basically spray training on everyone and pray that it would work. So this is basically what the human risk management through the human firewall program is.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I hear a very interesting approach in the sense that we usually do here, training the human or the, employees against certain attacks or being, overall resilient against and look out for certain aspects on it, but also having it more systemized like a human firewall sounds very intriguing. And with that, I want to ask one short question since we are running out of time. For your, like fellow CISOs or organizations that are looking to increase their resiliency on a short term, because of course this is a very continuous and like a long-term approach. What would be some things you can recommend? Let's say they go to work tomorrow and already can implement some things. What would be a few things they can right away look into?
In order to reduce reduce the human risk?
Reduce the human risk, yeah.
Okay, so basically you need to have some kind of way to keep your employees always up to date with the latest risks. Okay, so if you're not doing simulated phishing attacks, which what we used to do, and a lot of organizations do these days, you need to do some kind of awareness and training through other methods. But I do believe in the simulated phishing attacks, which are very easy to do these days. You can buy a solution off the market, and you can get up the ground running within days, basically. I suggest this is one of the most effective ways, or at least the starting stepping stone to a human firewall program, let's say. And that's how actually I started the human firewall program, by first implementing a simulated phishing exercise. And what we used to do, and that's very important, the simulated phishing exercise should be in connection with reality. What does that mean? Don't come up with exercises that don't make sense. Try to come up with exercises that really connect with what's going on around the world. So basically, if there are certain cyber attacks or certain phishing emails that are going around that are, let's say, during holidays, right? So during tax season, if you're in the US, of course, you need to localize that to the country where you're in and to the environment that you're in. For education is different than for banking, is different than for an oil company and another organization. Also, if you're in the States, for example, you know that April timeframe is the time when the attacks on your basically people who are doing their taxes increases dramatically, because that's the tax season. People start between January and April to do their taxes and submit their taxes for the year before. So that those months between January and April, that kind of phishing attack is very high. So it's prudent for the CISO and his organization, for example, if they're in the US, to do simulated attacks similar to that. If it is Christmas holiday, or if it's Eid, or whatever you have, any kind of holiday that you have in your region, also people, let's say, send promotions and send kind of deals out. You would use the same thing to send out deals. And so you want to be connected with the reality that's outside, with all threats that are looming around you. And basically, if you do that using a simulated exercise, which you can buy, as I mentioned, from a lot of vendors these days, then you can hit the ground running and be up there in 2 to 3 days and start protecting your constituents.
Thank you for sharing that as well. I hope that that also really helps a lot more organizations, just, at least to start going on
Right.
with this. And with that being said, I want to thank you so much once again, Ed, for joining us today and sharing your insights on this. It was a very, I think, fresh and nice outlook to, look at the human risk aspect from a very systemized approach. So yeah, thank you
Right.
so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Take care.
Have a lovely day.
Okay. Take care. You too. Bye.